Hello, my name is Tisa Bryant. I'm Program Director of the MFA in Creative Writing at CalArts, and it's my great pleasure to present Emerson Whitney. Emerson was and is a vibrant member of the CalArts community and of our MFA Creative Writing Program, and their innovative, risk-taking and creative projects and advocacy work on campus inspired and engaged everyone they came into contact with, including me. Emerson's insights and leadership with CalArts Queer Art Collective shaped 2 years of activism and curation, providing space for students and faculty to contribute to vital conversations about queer art and activism today. I had the pleasure of being one such faculty who participated in walkthroughs and talks for plaque exhibits, and also had the pleasure of working with Emerson in class, office hours, and the most important engagement of all, hallway conversations. That's where the work really happens, in collaboration, in conceptualizing new ideas, and really just bonding and forming community. And it was really great to run into them often. I know I speak for the faculty of the program when I say I'm proud of Emerson and excited for them, excited for us, as Emerson has figured out how to use their gifts and to share them. Emerson published their first book of poetry, Ghost Box, in 2014, right after graduating. And their memoir, Heaven, published this year and covered with good cheer from some of today's leading queer writers, was named Best Book by the AV Club, Paper Magazine, Lit Hub, Ms. Magazine, Chicago Review of Books, Refinery 29, The Observer, and the Seattle Times. And so deserving of all the accolades out in the world and all over the cover of the book. Right here, so pleased. If that's not enough, Emerson teaches some lucky students in the BFA program in creative writing at Goddard College and is a postdoctoral fellow in gender studies at the University of Southern California. A very busy person doing amazing and vital work. Please join me in welcoming Emerson Whitney.
Thank you so much, Tisa. So grateful to be here.
Yeah. So excited for you. So happy. It's got to feel good, especially with everything that's going on right now, that there's a way that you're kind of hopefully keeping on track. So let's start there. You know, how are you doing? How are you taking care of yourself? And what has it meant to have this amazing book come out at this point in time?
Yeah, thank you for asking that and checking in. I want to ask you the same thing. I think that's one of the things I'm really, it's like there's a dual thing going on. One is, it is so incredible to have a project like this go into the world at any point in time. In this moment, it has meant a lot of, in some ways, I guess, trust, because I've had to sort of put it in a bottle and send it out to sea in a way that is not typical. Like, usually I'm connecting a little more. And that's actually one of the greatest things I've gotten out of this time, is to recognize how much connection fuels my work. It's why I'm so deeply appreciative of my time at CalArts, because all of you teach me so many things, like especially you, Tisa. And at the same time, like, collaboration is a huge part of my work. It's a huge part of my thought process. So, you know, I've been really working at garnering those tools remotely. And like, one of my best friends, Jamila, I'll just say, you don't probably know who that is, but that's okay.
And to all the other friends, you're also best. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Many best friends. I have a bunch. But they and I have a Zoom hangout in which we talk about a bunch of things, but we also play like Nintendo every Sunday night, like over Zoom, like we're not actually together. And that kind of stuff has been really essential for, I think, just my, I guess, process, because I'm still working on things, and, you know, I'm grateful I'm in a place where there's a tremendous amount of activism going on still, even though I'm in a rural location. And so I've been able to get out and be with a lot of people in outdoor space to, you know, actually just be in the street, which is incredible and a really important part of my practice and again, like the way that I inhabit space. So So yeah, but you know, when it's interesting because I see so many memes about 2020 and like, you know, I mean, there's endless memes about how gnarly 2020 is. And this year was the year I was like super looking forward to because of this process. And one of the things that I think is also really essential is to notice when part of the practice is this letting go. Like this is not mine anymore. This belongs to 2020. This belongs to anyone who's engaging it beyond 2020. I'm just grateful to be part of this conversation with all of you.
So awesome.
Yeah.
And true to form, right? A very generous and self-reflective way to kind of just, you know, navigate our times and adjust and to new ways of maintaining connection and making new ones. And it's, you know, for all of the anxiety about whether or not people were going to read, you know, that kind of ordered in the aughts, you know, people are going to stop reading,
right.
too long, we can't engage. And in fact, you know, if there is an upshot to, you know, a global pandemic, there's not really, but people are reading. Yeah. People are engaging and sharing, and you know, book clubs are actually on the rise, and we really need to find ways to stay on the same page, literally and figuratively, and so it's really enjoyable. And I think it also just kind of, you know, underscores what has always been true about being an artist in the world, about what it is that we give to others unbidden. Nobody asks for us to write books or create paintings or anything like that. But we are kind of giving some electrical charge to others. And even though that's kind of mediated by Zoom right now, I've been thinking a lot about this, you know, that how the thing that happens when we're in person that is invisible and perhaps unfathomable, this kind of exchange of energy through all the ions and atoms in the air, that there's still something that's happening right now between all of us, and what happens between the page, another who reads it, and the author who populated it with text and feeling, and a way to kind of perhaps get at a little embodiment as well. Or we'll talk about that, the hot keyword, embodiment. We'll talk a lot about that, I hope, later. I know this might be a little bit of a rewind, but I'm really curious if you could talk to us a little bit about post-CalArts life to this moment. I mean, a lot of things have happened, and I'd really love to hear you just kind of narrate your path a little bit after you graduated in 2013.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't get to do this very often. So it's really, CalArts has been a tremendous springboard for everything I've done. So I'm grateful to be able to express the trajectory, I would say, which, you know, I think like the idea of graduation has to do with like steps in a sense. And I don't feel like that's like, it doesn't look like that at all. It's not like A to up. It's like, you know, a lot has personally happened. I got divorced, like, I don't know. But also like it was fine. We're fine and friends. It was cute actually. We like got married and then divorced like immediately. So it was like a cool party to be like, bye. Anyway, I feel like what CalArts supported me in was a bunch of things, but one of the things it really did for me was solidify my commitment to this practice. And also it helped me form a sustainable relationship to my writing practice. So I had the best time I really had the best time. And part of the reason I had the best time was because of, you know, the incredible wealth of faculty and, you know, everybody involved, but also because I really had given myself like the biggest present I've ever given myself, which was the time to actually just focus on working. I was teaching and doing other things. I actually was working at Red Cat too at the same time, but for the most part, I got to just focus. And what happened right after was exactly, you're right, Tisa, I published Ghostbox, I guess, pretty much right away. And essentially I did a lot of work around that for a while. I got to do some speaking things and go around and be, you know, do the kind of circuit that we do sometimes, so we're sharing our work at the conferences and things like that. And then
and you've done installations and performances as well, right?
Cool.
In LA?
Yep, I'm forgetting about a lot of these things. I'm glad you're reminding me. I did do a lot of that stuff. Actually, I experimented with like collage work for a while. I did a bunch of things at Poetic Research Bureau and other places in LA. I wrote little things for a bunch of other publications. I kept collaborating. Entertext is also a CalArts spawned project, and I did a bunch of things with them. But one of the central things that happened, I guess, in 2016 is I tried to go to another like class. Like I was missing school a lot. I was also teaching at, oh my God, I was teaching at 4 different community colleges in LA. And I was working an insane amount of hours and teaching, but somehow I was still trying to write this. And in 2016, I was feeling kind of frustrated with not really understanding theory. I don't come from a traditional education background. I went to 7 different colleges before I found my undergrad, and then eventually CalArts. But yeah, I really struggled with traditional learning environments. And so I just felt like I didn't get what everybody else was saying. I was like, I've never read like these foundational texts, but I wanted to like read who Fred Moten was reading, for example. Like I wanted to understand it a little better. And I tried to take like, or audit a class at like Occidental or something. And they were like, you have to enroll. And I was like, oh, so I didn't want to do, I couldn't really make that happen. So I ended up going to the European Graduate School, which was, it was really a very helpful experience. One of the things I learned there is that everyone seems like they know what they're talking about in the realm of theoretical engagement. And really, it seems to be that people choose a track and study it. Again, like I don't know why I'm talking about Nintendo-based systems today more than once, but essentially it's almost like Pokemon or something where you like focus on like a, I don't know, it's like playing cards. It feels like people just choose what they like and then study it to the extent that they can recite it in a way that feels really versed and cool. So I got a lot of confidence. That's what happened to me at CalArts too, is I learned that like, yeah, I can give myself permission to engage these things. So in 2018, April of 2018, I graduated from there. So I did a really accelerated PhD. And because I'd written my thesis really quickly, and then right before that right like in that same moment, because I was whatever it's called when you're all but dissertation. ABD. I was ABD, thank you. I was ABD and USC. I had actually, they taught Ghostbox at USC at one of the gender studies classes, but a big lecture one. So they knew my work and I got to present there, and then they offered me this postdoctoral position, which is, I'm in my 3rd year and it ends in May. So
wow,
yeah,
that's fabulous. And I love what you just described too, and you kind of broke it down, because there's a way that the acquisition of knowledge and experience can be so mystified.
Mm-hmm.
In the main, in the academy. And what you described is simply practice, you know, that can happen, as you know, within a given program or outside of it, and is ongoing, right? You figure out what you like, what you're into, and you focus on those things. And of course, there's, you know, it's a bit rhizomatic. There's some distractions and other things that we can fold into it, but really, you know, it's about practice. And I think practice is a lot more real in a way than this idea of faking it until you make it, because mm-hmm. that actually diminishes the trajectory of practice, right? As if it wasn't real, you didn't really know anything until one moment you really did, or you made it. And that's just not my philosophy of what it means to think and to grow. And we really connected about that while you were at CalArts, having non-traditional educational experiences and stuff. And I think it yields a lot more sometimes than the rote expectation of what it means to know. And your book really examples that also, what lived experience, the kind of teacher it is, and the process of kind of understanding what it is that you learned in the present moment, not just in the past. Okay, so that might be a great place to transition into the next part of our event with you. And we'll introduce Pricilla Jin Chung and Alex Barlas, both of whom are graduates from the School of Theater in Acting. We're really pleased to have them join you, Emerson, in this selected reading from Heaven.
Recently, when I was visiting my family outside of New York, I found a small paperback on the shelf. It had a strange as above, so below chalice on the cover that was drawn into the outline of two heads. I thought it might be something witchy. I picked it up and was shocked to see that it was a worn copy of Adult Children of Alcoholics by Janet Woititz, Edie, 1983. There's an extremely 80s black and white portrait of Janet on the back cover. Puffed hair, ruffled collar. She's looking off into the distance with a pensive, hopeful glint.
I opened the book and realized it was full of highlights and notations. Next to certain descriptors, Gloria was a good little girl who did what she was told. There were cursive names of family members. I presume they were someone's family members, written in ballpoint in the margins. Mom and Cheryl, Mickey, Davy, etc. I don't know anyone with those names. I opened the book to its first highlight on the very first page.
If a child is like a puppy, you were not a child.
I sat on the edge of the bed in the room and considered it, pictured my childhood self, weirdly mannish, serious. I thought of a phone conversation between Mom and me that went something like,
You've never really felt like my daughter.
I paused.
We were in between conversations about her cat. The cat had wrestled out of its harness at the time she was letting her cat outside like a pony in the circus on a leash attached to a stake in the backyard. The cat loved it, sat while she put its harness on, rubbed her hand with its face.
I thought she was about to say something about my lack of femininity, about my madness or whatever this is, about me in relationship to Ellen DeGeneres or Chaz Bono, was braced for the awkwardness of that.
Instead, she said, I've always felt we were more like friends.
I held the phone away from my head and listened to the noise of her voice mop the air around the speaker. She didn't stop talking. I held the phone away from my head at arm's length. She kept talking. I tossed it onto the bed and lay next to it. She was still talking.
This is not friends, I figured.
I was feeling slighted at the time. I wanted her to ask about me. I was doing things with my life that I was proud of and wanted to share. I wanted to interrupt her and say, hey, Mom, I was pregnant in my dream last night. The baby that emerged from me was minuscule and popped from my vagina like a tampon, not fully cooked. I checked it out like I would anything and stuck it back inside myself, knowing it needed to warm longer. Maybe I do want to be a parent after all of this.
On Mother's Day this year, she and I had a better phone call, partially because I just called to listen. During the call, she lowered her voice and pressed her lips against the receiver, said softly toward the end, do you think heaven could be the best days of your life on repeat? Do you think when I go to heaven, if I get to go, I'd go back to those days when all three of you were toddlers and I was your mom? Do you think heaven could be those times when we spread the sheet out on the floor while it was so hot?
She says heaven like a little girl asking about heaven. It's like an accident, like wetting the bed, the way she says it. Her regret has mutated into a titanic childishness. I never know what to say.
On our visit last summer, she wanted badly to show me this vernal spring, a Jesuit spring, she called it. We had to trespass across this rich woman's property, park almost in her driveway. It was July. Most of the summer people were in their homes, so it seemed likely that the house was occupied. But she walked us up to it anyway, talked to me about how this is her favorite house, how she loved to live here. I took a breath as I watched her navigate the expensive place, growing more and more anxious that a twisted face might show up in one of the windows.
She walked right up to a window, pressed her hands against it, looked inside, then called me over. I pretended not to hear. Her ruddy body swayed through thigh-high wildflowers.
I didn't move.
They're out of town, she called.
I didn't believe her.
We never made it to the spring. It was high tide, so she couldn't show it to me. But I followed slightly behind her as she climbed the thin sediment away from the dunes. She led me to a small clearing of grass near the shoals.
I saw a baby deer laying here once, she said, sitting down in the grass near a knot of bushes.
It was just like this, she said, putting her head in her hands, curling her body into a circle.
Come be a baby deer with me, she squealed.
I hesitated. The grass looked muddy. She was wide-eyed.
Come on, she said.
I stuffed my hands in my pockets and sat down in the grass next to her. She smelled like tea and high tide. Tiny gnats made their way into her hair. I brushed at them for her, and her breathing lit my hand.
She made a deer noise, like a bleat. She wanted me to lie down, was going to keep bleeding. A single leaf fell behind us. She bleated again, looked up at me. I lay down like she wanted.
There you go, she said, like I'd found something.
Who was mothered like they wanted to be?
We listened to the water for a long time, not saying anything. She had her hands clasped under her head, was looking at a line of waves moving at us from a boat.
She said it again. Do you think I'll go to heaven?
I listened to her breathing, mine mixed with hers.
I was supposed to be a deer. I nodded, hoping the sound of my forehead pushing slightly against the grass was enough of an answer.
When I visited Mom that summer, we sat outside her house watching her cat. She lives in a subsidized housing development where all the houses are pastel. She lives alone, so alone, surrounded by houses with plastic playground equipment and small families.
We were sitting on her back porch having sodas, and I noticed how nervous I was to be near her. My leg was jogging up and down.
She looked a little pink, like she'd been running, but she hadn't been. Her hair was freshly dyed and she was brushing it behind her ears and talking to me, high-pitched and passionate like water falling, tripping into that very particular accent that I can understand and imitate, but no one else seems to be able to.
Sitting in her plastic lawn furniture on the deck, I tried to relax my hands. I brought my legs up with me into the cushioned plastic chair. I looked at her profile because she wasn't looking at me. My hair was buzzed on both sides, long on top, but I tried to tone down all the LA stuff for her. Mom was wearing fleece and flannel, me too. She hardly looked older, only her hands were aging in a way.
After a few minutes on her porch, she asked me if I'd like to see her outdoor altar.
What?
My outdoor altar, she said, standing up.
Sure, I said. I put my hands in my pockets. She was skipping toward a part of her crescent-shaped yard that backed up against a thin strip of forest, walking us to an edge that seemed thickest with trees. Her back was to me. Small brown and black birds blew up around us.
It's my altar to my children, she said over her shoulder.
I followed her under branches, over a spongy hill. She pointed to a small grouping of little statues that she'd gathered beneath a tree. She pointed at each one and explained it in that lilting child's voice, higher pitched than before because she was excited. She squatted next to the statues and looked up at me. Her eyes were so light.
There was a green cartoon frog holding a sunflower pressed into the moss. That's Ty, she said. The other was some kind of smiling woodland animal on a log, Gunner. And I was this somber stone one, a girl wearing overalls, lying on her stomach and reading a book. The girl's face and back were cracked quite a bit, almost in half, a big crack right between her eyes.
It's perfect, I said, because it was.
She pointed at a little metal cross that she'd nailed into a tree above the vignette.
I knew her in the mornings with my devotional, she said, pointing out a matted place in the grass underneath the tree.
A tight melancholy moved in my throat.
That's great, Mom, I said, stuffing my hands in my pockets.
She pointed up at a cardinal bopping across a branch overhead and started cooing to the cat.
Do you see it? She said. Do you see the birdie? She spoke to the cat like no one could hear. The cat watched her finger, switched its tail.
As she led me back to the chairs on her porch, I realized I wanted to tell her about my life. I just found out my first book was being published, landed my first teaching job. I opened my mouth to say something about Los Angeles, but stopped. Her eyes were darting all around the yard like her cat's. Her shoulders were forward. Her chin was high. I watched her, took another sip of soda.
She asked if I noticed a hummingbird feeder, and I nodded. She'd shown it to me before, made it herself out of something glass and put it on a stake near the porch.
She said we had to be quiet if we wanted to see a hummingbird. Her jaw was set. I jumped my leg up and down. I literally had hundreds of hummingbirds in my yard in Los Angeles. I'd just been on a 6-hour flight, a 5-hour bus trip, and an hour car ride. I wanted to talk. I listened to her breathing. She sat there with big blue eyes, rubbing her hands together, skin flaking off from the chemicals that she used to clean rooms at the inn, watching for just one, at least one, like her cat.
And the longer we sat there, the more her innocence was too much for me. This attention to the birds and the yard, too much, a crazy amount of sweetness. I wished for someone else to glance at. I rubbed my hands together and sat with her silently for another hour or so until it was cold.
Eventually, she sighed and swung her eyes toward me.
I guess they're not coming, she said, so deeply, so sadly.
I'd forgotten what we were doing. Oh, the hummingbirds, I said. Her shoulders were bent forward, curving around her face. She looked like she might cry. I was sorry in a way that felt like falling asleep. The light that was hitting her glasses was sharp and sweet. She looked so human. She was a person. She is a person, I kept thinking. She is a person, and this is how she loves me. It's okay, I said, soft in the way I said it. I don't need to see a hummingbird. I came to see you. I guess, she said, looking at her hands in her lap. I guess I'm not supposed to show you my hummingbirds. We sat there in silence for another few minutes. She was sitting in a chair a few feet away, angled in the other direction. I wanted to put my arm around her, my forearm, her shoulders. I didn't. The light off her body, my body, was warm. I didn't need to move.
So wonderful. It's always great to hear something aloud. And we're going to have a conversation about this. And I think I'd like to start with Pricilla and Alex, just in terms of what it was like to read this. We tried something, to read this in the round, to have this memoir that's so much about becoming and unbecoming, about queerness and transness and the body, identity, family, so many things that we share as humans and things that we don't. And I wonder what it was for you to try to inhabit this text and imagine it and have it come out of your mouths as well as your actors. And this is something that you do with other people's words. What was this experience like, if you could describe it?
I can go first. I think when I initially got it, because it came in the form of a book, that itself was different because we get scripts. And so when I first read through it, I guess there was like a perspective of me just reading someone else's story. And then when I started preparing for it and making it more personal and trying to find connecting points of like where something sparks my imagination or sparks my memory of my mom or like my family or where I'm from. And it was also a different experience of reading it out loud by myself and reading it together, because I was aware that there's like a rhythm happening. There's also like, do I leave a beat? I'm also looking at how you both are, like the pacing of it. And I think because Emerson, you're the writer as well, having the writer read their own work, that in itself as well, I found myself trying to follow your speed. Because I think there is a responsibility, because it's someone else's words, it's someone else's life. And so there is a sensitivity to it, and there is a weight to it, which is something that I haven't experienced a lot, because a lot of the writers we work with we don't know them, or they passed away, or like it's Shakespeare. But this was actually the first time that I've actually been in the same room as the writer. So that experience was really new for me this time. Yeah.
Yeah, receiving a book is intimidating. I come from a very much like Emerson, not traditional background of school. When you said that earlier, I was like, wow, another thing. Yeah, I struggled with reading my whole life. I actually didn't struggle with reading my whole life. I stopped reading because I thought, there's where I'm from, there's this like code that how certain men need to act, no reading, we can't do this. We're not allowed to explore text, we're not allowed, it's just not common. So only now that I've been at CalArts have that love for reading has came back. So when I get books, I'm very intimidated by it. But I don't know, I think after page 1, it was like, oh, this is, there's something, with this particular book that, oh, this is, sometimes I could read a book and it's a book. And then sometimes you read something and it's not a book. It's in the form of a book, this is a book. But it's more than that. And I think you always have to look for that. You always have to look for the more of it. Yeah, like I said, it's in this form of a book, but it's more than just that. It's someone's life story. Not only is this someone's life story, but there are millions of people in America right now and across the world that identify with this book. So it's also a symbol as well. So it's like finding that, looking past the form of what it is. And yeah, so yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
That was really beautiful, for both of you, what you just shared. And I'm hanging a lot of thoughts right now as I'm about to ask Whitney what their experience was in hearing their words come out of someone else's mouths, to kind of get past the form. In some ways, that's a great way to kind of talk about the aboutness of this book, kind of dealing with the form of the body, and kind of getting past what's kind of always projected onto the form of the body, to something else, to a way of being and seeing and feeling in the world, and experience that is kind of true to who you are, in your soul, in your spirit, or in your guts, however you get to that, wherever the trueness of the self resides, name that thing. But getting past the form is a beautiful phrase, because it doubles or triples, the kinds of things we talk about in the program for creative writing, about form and content and genre, but again, also about the body, but also about text and reading. For you as actors, the kind of what the form of your work generally is or is expected to be, and even that shifted in this experience from what you said. So Emerson, what was it for you to hear Alex and Pricilla read alongside you, and to have all of these different voices and inhabit the world of your memoir?
I mean, that was awesome. I could do that. I could listen to y'all do that all day. I was very delighted. And thank you once again, CalArts, for giving me a little bit of a collaborative moment and experiment. I'm so appreciative of listening to you all, yeah, like so carefully and thoughtfully engaged the language and each word. And I just love that. I mean, that it's not mine anymore. That's always how I feel. I'm thankful that you care about me as the maker. And it's also, I hear how cool that is, maybe because I'm not dead currently. I'm right here, even though I'm virtual. I'm right here. And so, yeah, like that's awesome to maybe be the first time you've had that. It's lovely to hear that care, and also the complexity of knowing that it really isn't mine. This is mediated reality. This is not like, how can we ever call this? I mean, it's absolutely nonfiction. Like the thing that I didn't invent the scenes. There's nothing invented in that sense. I struggled to do that. I wish I was a fiction person in some ways. So that seems a little bit like maybe more fun. I don't know. Because the level of risk here is it has been quite enormous, I have to say. And at the same time, yeah, it's super not actual. There's a little disclaimer in the back that's like, there are easily this is from memories, so there are little holes and gaps, and that's really one of the things that I hang on in this work, or is my focus in this work, and you all just helped me reiterate it, which is that there are gaps in how we engage with each other. And actually, I'm so curious about what happens if, rather than trying to understand each other immediately, if we experience the interaction as if it were an event. So you've kind of made this text alive in that way and turned it into that kind of event. And I'm glad for that. So thank you. And again, yeah, that was great. I was very appreciative to hear it through you.
Were there other parts of the book, if you had a chance to kind of go through the whole thing in preparation for our event today, were there parts of the book that you were kind of ready to voice? Were there kind of moments of resonance that you kind of thought like, okay, if we get to do this one, I'm down? Or
more like sections? There were a lot of moments, and that's one thing I really did enjoy about the book, is that, I don't know if it was intentional, but there were a lot of breathing moments as the reader that I just had to stop and like, whoa, and then continue reading. And I think those kind of moments, like even just in the passage that we read, there were a few moments like that. Well, right now I don't. Maybe the bits, the stories about with the grandmother, especially the part of like not wanting to leave.
Yeah.
Like how that moment was like, you don't speak about it. She didn't respond, but it's like, as a reader, I can imagine what's going on in the character of the grandmother. So it's those kind of moments that I just paused, like the lines that I paused. I really did enjoy I put my hands in my pocket. Like that was like a recurring thing that happened. And that tells me so much about the character or like the person. I'm like, oh, what does that mean for me? And I literally put my hands in my pocket and I was like, when do I do that? And I'm like, well, I do that when I'm nervous. I do that when like I don't know what I need to do with my hands, like in public spaces. I do that on stage all the time, like when people are watching and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put my hands in my pocket. So it sparks imagination for me as an actor when I read those moments. Yeah.
Cool. I was also kind of thinking about how earlier in Emerson's book, when they are put into special ed, and there's this whole kind of evaluation of them as, like they've failed some tests, but also, they're very good at listening. Like their forte is kind of like listening and being there for other people. And so it's a bit uncanny, right, for us to read this section that is just such a tense, frustrating connection and disconnection at the same time, where the narrator is forced into this listening and watchful position. and really wants to talk and really wants to connect, went through a long journey to get to their mother and is waiting for, it's almost like waiting for Godot or something, like waiting for the hummingbirds. You know, this is a whole other thing, you know, that, you know, this activity is displacing what should actually be happening. And in that moment, I couldn't stop thinking about that evaluation and about learning and how untrue all of that, of course, was. And here we are in this moment with this character, actually a person. I mean, I do that because there is that critical separation between itself and this other thing. Right now, it's out in the world. You know, the character Emerson is just like, I just got a job, you know, like all this amazing stuff is happening to me. And we're sitting here like cats, you know, legs shaking, hands like, and I guess I need to turn that into some sort of question, but maybe I don't. It's just a point of, there was just something very rich in that. And maybe for you, Alex, in thinking about what you just said about education and reading and, you know, that reading isn't cool, you know, to kind of talk about and nerd out in public. And that moment of having to hold this other self and reality in your body kind of tamped down while you're in this present moment that should be for you, but is actually not, you know.
I think there's something extremely powerful about, you know, living, for me, and I don't know how Emerson, how they might feel about it, but living through those moments of those guys or the boys in my hood telling me like, oh, yo, you can't read, that's stupid. Now that I find myself in situations where I might be in that same situation where I have to, you know, conform to that. I feel so much powerful. You know, it's like, I'm not, now it's not even, I'm like the word conforming, I'm not even conforming, I'm just, you know, I do love to read. I do love to do this stuff. And now I have the power to sit with you and to be around and still know I love this. Like, it's not going to be tarnished by the idea of what people want me to be, or the identity of what people see me as. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Emerson, I also kind of thought about this as the reading, I mean, with Pricilla and Alex and you, as a way to perhaps perform this idea of the I as a plurality instead of, or maybe alongside the singularity of that pronoun I, that there's also this kind of multiplicity, there's a plurality. After this kind of where we're at in this conversation, what are your thoughts about that? You've said repeatedly that this belongs to the world now, but there's still an I who has a claim, right, on this story. What are your thoughts about the I as a plurality and the singularity of I as you move towards your next projects?
I'm so appreciative of that question, all these questions, Tisa. And, you know, I think about the subjective I a lot. It's a foundation of the ways that I move into writing. I spent a lot of years as a journalist, and, you know, that was supposed to be an objective I, if the I ever made it in. And I question, just like I was, I guess, already saying, like, I don't really understand, I don't know if there's an objective I. So in a similar way, I don't know if there is a singular version of the ways that I inhabit space. I just had a really weird thing go on a lot of yesterday where I recently bought a used truck. I'm just telling you, see, whatever. I was just about to make a allusion to the fact that, like, I'm listening to your question and then I'm applying it to my life. And then I'm going to get back to, like, the theoretical concept. Like, that's kind of how my brain works. So here's my anecdote, which is I bought a truck. I forgot trucks are gendered. I, like, literally paid cash for it and put it on my credit card. It's an extremely inexpensive vehicle from 2002 with issues, but that's where I'm at. So I brought it to the mechanic and the person started hitting on me, which I was like, wow, this hasn't happened in a while. And in a way that was very uncomfortable. And I swear to God, it's the length of my hair, but that's another conversation. At a certain point, it got so extreme that I had to be more direct when I was saying that I'm not a lady, because he was actually trying to take my arm to show me, he wanted to go with me to the mirror and to show me how pretty I am, which I was like, how do I elbow the person? Like, how far does this go? And what I said was, you know, I'm not a lady, because he was like, love a woman in a truck. And I was just like, but I couldn't really make it stop until I said, I'm not, blah, blah, blah. And then he was like, well, does handsome work? And I was like, in what reality am I inhabiting right now? Like, what is happening? And then another person came out and was like, good looking is gender neutral. And I was just like, huh. And there was no way for me to have, I was completely powerless over the way I was being seen and referred to. No matter what I did, if I came home and chopped off my hair and did what I thought was appropriate, I still have no control. I'm always just toggling. I'm trying to toggle, but that's actually so much energy. And, you know, in a way, because I have no control, I'm in a cardboard control room and it's exhausting. So in my work, here we go, where I loop back. In my work, I'm always trying to play. I really wanted to give the reader the experience of that, because that is something I do have some agency in. I don't want to say control, because I still don't really, but I have some agency there where I can give you, if I want you to have a blue couch in writing, I can give you a blue couch. Then you are probably animating the texture of the couch. So I didn't control that part, but I can. If I want to go back and I want to make it a blue velour couch, now I have given you the image. What I try to do is play with what I give you and what I don't give you, because I want you to animate a bunch of it yourself. And that is the only place where I get to play like that. It's my little sandbox. And it brings me a tremendous amount of joy. So that's kind of, you're seeing, I'm like beaming, because this is like my happy place, is to be able to make this work and to share it. So yeah, thanks.
Wow. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I think this is a great place to, I've been thanking you, so I have thanked you, and thank Pricilla, and thank Alex, and thank you CalArts and CalArts Weekend, and our audience for watching and engaging with Emerson Whitney. We're so happy for you, Emerson. Thank you for sharing your work with us, and I look forward, as we all do, to whatever is next.